Warning. This show may contain offensive content. Viewer discretion is advised.
Engines were ablaze, cameras rolling hard in a wild twisted maze. Levers stealing fire, the open roads are thrown. Back in life, televised, we're breaking every bone. Adrenaline surges, brace for the fall. Hitting it with HardWire, hear the engine scream. Living fast and reckless, this is our very dream. Riding hard, never slowing in the spotlight we shine. A biker's faithful journey, this life is ours divine. With HardWire, the crowd screams the name, chasing down the shadow for a ticket to the fame. Chains rattling loud, the brotherhood's alive. Every episode gets better, we're here to survive. Some dust till dawn, we're the kings of this road. Hitting it with HardWire, hear the engine scream. Living fast and reckless, this is our family dream. Riding hard, never slowing in the spotlight we shine. A biker's faithful journey, this life is ours divine. On the edge of chaos, we embrace the fear. Hitting it with HardWire, we'll always be here.
Hey, welcome to Hittiin It with HardWire. How's everybody doing? What's up, Soundproof? Gary, Frank, Motorbomb, So Loud, Old Man. What's happening, everybody? How you doing? Good to see everybody. I was working on the trailer most of the day today. That's why everything's running a little behind. Then, honestly, me and the old lady started coming into the air conditioning to cool off. And I started a movie, and I couldn't drag my ass away from it. So yeah, that's why you got me late, a little bit late today. The movie was ending right as my show was about to go on. I'm sitting at the edge of my seat going, oh, shit. Good movie. Till the end. And then I was a little freaking pissed off at the ending. But, hey, when does that not happen, right, anymore? It's man, I hate when they do that. It's like a good movie, and you're sitting on the edge of your seat most of the whole damn movie, and then the ending's oh, you gotta be kidding me. Really? So that was one of those movies. It's Lee Cronin's The Mummy. It's nothing about the other Mummy movies at all. It's called Lee Cronin's The Mummy. If you get a chance to watch it. The ending might piss you off a bit, but hey, the rest of the movie was really good. Kind of had me on the edge of my seat, I have to say. The ending was what? Really? That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, whatever. I mean, if you watch the movie and you have no sense and you don't have any clue, and you're if you keep it on a shallow level, I guess the ending doesn't have to make sense. But whatever. I mean, it had an ending. I would have rather had a cliffhanger ending, to be honest, than make it all weird like that. But at any rate, how is everybody? Doing good? Can you guess what I want to what we're talking a little bit about today? Has anybody else followed this stupid bricks and minifigs thing? I think the word figs reminds me of Fig Newtons, but I'm old. I had to sit and think about it for a minute. Minifigs, what the fuck? It's like a little miniature. They had minifig Newtons. That's what it reminded me of. And I went, oh, figurines, mini figurines. Okay, minifig. Okay, I get it now. But we don't have any of those kind of stores that I know of anywhere around me, so I had never heard of them. But there's a few reasons why I kind of wanted to talk about it. I couldn't find a summary of it anywhere. It's about this that's done by this guy named what the hell's his name? Something Ben, Crazy Ben or something like that. And at any rate, the guy consigns all like the world's largest Lego, Star Wars Lego set, consigns them to this bricks and minifig store to sell them for him. Okay, and the store has some legal troubles, apparently, or something, and another guy takes over the store. And they just decide that they're going to have his Lego sets. And he tries to get his money. And they start playing legal limbo ease with them like they do to everybody, dude. This is, like, when I watched it, it's like, dude, that is no surprise. They do that to fucking everybody. These corporations just shit on the little guy. They don't care. They think, see, this is where they fucked up. They thought they would just basically push him aside and that would be the end of it. They didn't think that it would go all over the internet, which once the Ben dude got involved and he's an internet guy, they should have started putting two and two together and tried to settle with this guy instead of basically saying, well, we don't care what we're keeping them. And that's basically good. Soundproof. Good. I'm doing pretty good. What's up, Rolling 3? Good to see you. Damn it. I forgot. Anyway, they tried to put him in like a legal limbo. And I guess now they're kind of wanting to settle with him now that it's gone all over the internet and everybody's fucking talking about it. Now they kind of want to try to settle with him. And it's too little, too late. You know, the absolute reputational damage that's already been done. And if you ask me, I don't know, nobody's talked about it that I've seen. They're talking about giving him his money. But how is he not entitled to damages at this point? That's what I want to know. How is he not entitled to sue him for far more than what his bricks were worth and sue him for damages? Because at this point, it's went on for years. It's caused him all kinds of fucking problems. This guy Ben got involved, and it's caused him all kinds of legal problems. Now, granted, Ben pulled some shenanigans, and if I encourage you to go back and watch all of the episodes because he pulled some very intelligent. I saw most of them coming because at my age, if you've been around people that get in trouble a lot, I've seen most of these things, and I kind of knew the directions a lot of these things were going to go because I've seen a lot of it. Okay. And he did play some really clever stuff he had to have somebody telling him. Somebody had to have been advising him. Not only that, but the amount of time that he put into it, into this video, the amount of money he clearly put into it. He's got to be a trust fund baby. I'll bet if anybody looks him up, he's got to be a trust fund baby. His dad's probably a lawyer and probably was advising him on a lot of this shit. Something like that. Because none of us could have afforded to just like fly halfway across the country, take all this time off, throw all this like money and shenanigans into it for a kid his age. He didn't know any of this shit. You're not telling me he knew any of this stuff. I know there's no way. but he played some very good and smart shenanigans to basically make this company stand up and pay attention. And it's made the cut viral because a couple of bigger YouTubers decided to cover it. And then once a couple of big YouTubers cover it, it's everywhere. And this is, I couldn't find any summaries of it, but this is actually an attorney talking about it. And he says, well, you should have got an attorney to begin with. Well, he had an attorney, apparently. And the corporation basically told him that, hey, we got more money, deeper pockets, and we can tie you up in litigation forever. And it's going to be it's going to cost you more than these bricks are worth, which anybody that knows anything about big companies, they try that bullshit all the time. A lot of them do. And then one of the reasons why it went all over the place is because they end up, the new owners of this bricks and minifigs that wanted to basically take his Lego set without paying for it or whatever, kept trying to call the cops on him. And apparently he was friends with the cops. Supposedly they were all a member of a Mormon church, of a local Mormon church. I don't know how much to read into that. Mormons are, I believe, communal in a lot of ways. So they might be bound to try to help each other out. But they kept trying to throw Reckless Ben. That's his name, Reckless Ben. Reckless Ben, and he's reckless. Kept trying to throw him in jail. And they kept finding reasons to protect this criminal, basically, that was trying to steal these Legos, and throwing Reckless Ben in jail. It's a crazy story. It really is. And the other reason why I wanted to cover some of this is because, let's say it's brought to light to a lot of people that don't realize that this kind of shit happens all the time. This kind of shit happens all the time with cops, with big companies. I've seen it. I've seen it plenty of times where these big companies will shit all over you, and the cops will try to help them. Cops will cover them. Cops will try to arrest you when you didn't do anything wrong. See, that shit happen all the time. And especially in small towns. Especially in small towns, and there's nothing you can do about it. They can destroy your whole fucking life in a blink of an eye. When you're the one who's basically being robbed, and when it's a company and they've got deeper pockets than you, it's such crazy and unfair bullshit, but it happens all the time. And that's one of the stories I think everybody's missing, is how frequently this kind of shit happens. And it does. It happens all the time. Cops in small towns all the time look out for their own interests, or some rich guy's interest that lives in town. And they shit all over people. Now, it's not all in all circumstances, but in a lot of them. What's up, AU? Good to see you, man. And then, if you watch the entire story, this smug SOB that owns this company, CEO or whatever, and this other guy are in cahoots with each other. And it just makes you, it's so infuriating to see how smug they are. And like, just brush this guy off. $200,000 was nothing to them. All they had to do was settle with him. They knew it was a fact that this shit happened. They knew it. It wasn't like they didn't know. They knew it was a fact that this shit happened. And they didn't, whether it be they intentionally did it to damage him, to help themselves, is unknown. But the way they brushed it off is infuriating, because Anybody that has a $200,000 fucking Lego set, you know, they probably ain't got no other money. I mean, really. And if they did, they, you know, they were probably a CEO of some big company, but this guy clearly wasn't. They were pretty much leveraged to the max, probably to buy these damn Legos. That's why they wanted to sell them.
Did Bricks and Minifigs steal $200,000 worth of Star Wars Legos from an 83-year-old man? Well, the truth is more complicated than you might think, and it actually might be worse than you think. Or it might be better. It depends. It's complicated. But one thing is for sure, it's definitely different than you think, because there is a lot of misinformation out there. Because everyone is getting this case wrong. But this case has everything a law professor could want: theft, conversion, bailment, the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, franchise law, successor and interest liability, contractual interpretation, bailment, giant law firms, and Legos. But if you're watching this video, you probably already know who Reckless Ben is. And according to his video and subsequent court documents, starting around the year 2000, Brian Mansell's father, who is now 83, began collecting retired Star Wars Legos set. The family invested around $30,000 and amassed a collection of over 780 sets and 1,200 minifigures, all sealed in the original package.
Well, they were trying to divide it up.
Started out as a genuine love for the Star Wars
franchise. Because they probably tried to sell it
Remember
as
when
a
we all used to
set
like Star Wars?
first.
But it turned out to be
And
a great
nobody wanted
investment
it
as
that
well.
bad.
By the time Brian
Especially
was
as
an
much
adult,
as Star
the
Wars
value
has
of the Star
taken a
Wars
hit
collectibles
in
had
recent
skyrocketed.
years.
As the police report put it, quote, he and his father own a large collection of Lego sets valued at a significant amount of money. Many of these sets are vintage and difficult to find. Now, I'm not telling you to drain your 401k and put it into Legos. Ask the Beanie Baby collectors how that worked out. But some single sets like the legendary Cloud City are worth more than $10,000 a piece.
If you've
The
had
solid
kids that
chrome
like
Darth Vader
Legos,
minifigure is
fucking
going for over
Legos are
$1,300
expensive.
a pop. And Mansell estimated the value of the collection at approximately
Just new
$200,000. But also,
plain
it may not
sets
have been
are-
worth
they're
anywhere near
expensive.
that. Some estimates peg the value of this extensive collection more at $60,000. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Now, the plan had always been to sell it to fund college for their grandkids. But as his father's health declined, Brian decided to act and consigned the collection to Bricks and Minifigs, a chain where collectors trade in used or unbuilt Legos for cash or store credit. Now, a consignment is a contract where you, the consignor, gives something to a third party, the consignee,
Well, this
to
I
sell
watched
that
this
thing
video,
for
and
you.
it brings up
Generally,
a lot
you
of good
retain
points
the
that a lot of
ownership
people
that
don't
item
talk about.
until the store sells it. And when it sells, you get paid.
A lot of
and the
people are
store
just
gets a
acting
commission.
on sheer
Or as
rage
Reckless Ben explained it,
because it is
I wrote the
enraging.
contract.
In the contract, it says that these are still the family's Lego sets, but every time one gets sold, the store gets to keep a small percentage of each sale.
This was a store's worth of inventory. So that store that day was nothing but my dad's collection. Like, all the shelves filled. They had to bring in extra shelves and filled the whole party room with shelves.
Now, it's very important to note, this particular store, located in Oregon, was a franchise, meaning that a corporation, a franchisor, licensed its brand, trademarks, and business model and operating system to a franchisee who owns and operates a semi-independent business under that brand. Now, McDonald's is famous for this. Most McDonald's restaurants that you see are not owned by the McDonald's Corporation. The McDonald's Corporation agrees with an independent franchisee to own and run that particular location. But because Bricks and Minifigs seems
The other thing I don't understand is there's a lot of people boycotting the company, like all the Bricks and Minifigs locations. And these are all independently owned and operated franchises, individuals. And I don't suggest that anybody do that to any location, because these are just normal Joes that had nothing to do with what happened. Corporate, yes. And that location, yes. Corporate should have done something about it. That's kind of, they license franchises to people to have their individual franchise, and they have to follow their business model and basic sets of rules to be a franchise, but they still kind of oversee all of it, and they still have some like power over it. As you'll see, they pulled the franchise license away from the original owner, saying that they still owed him money in franchise licensing fees and whatnot. So they still have something to do with it. And how, like I said, how the guy who owns this set of Legos and Reckless Ben and every franchise in the country ought to be signing up to sue Bricks and Minifigs corporate, because they're all damaged now and they're all losing tons of business. And because they did this, caused damages to all the franchises. So how they're all not signing on to litigation to probably I would try to get out of the franchise agreement to begin with and sue them for all the damages and potential income. You know, how nobody's doing that part of it, I don't understand either. And how, like, I know Lego, the company, is like just huge. And this case is minuscule to them. But how they're not at least worried about damaging their reputation, I don't understand. I know they're not the one that had anything to do with this, but as long as they're in bed with them and letting them carry their things, and they have like a licensing agreement to sell Lego, how they're not pissed off or wanting to at least weigh in on it, I don't understand that. That's bad on them. Even though it's not their fault, but they have enough power that they should try to put their thumb on the scale to help the little guy. Would look great for him.
To operate on the McDonald's model of franchises, I think it's really important for people to know that they shouldn't be review bombing other Bricks and Minifig stores. Your local store probably has nothing to do with this whatsoever. And even if you hate Bricks and Minifigs corporate for what you think that they did, don't take that out on the individual stores, because they're probably just independent people, some of them probably mom and pop stores, who have absolutely nothing to do with this whole affair at all. Now, this particular store in Salem, Keizer, Oregon was owned and run by Crystal Law through her company BAMF Salem 1 LLC. So on November 22nd, 2023, Brian Mansell and Crystal Law signed a consignment agreement. Since this is the document that basically everything in this case turns on, let's actually read that agreement. Section 4, titled, quote, "Title to Merchandise," spells out the ownership of unsold Lego sets in one sentence, quote, "Consigned merchandise shall remain the property of Mansell until sold." Now, this is the classic scenario. The consignor, Mansell, had legal title to the Legos even while they sat on this Bricks franchise shelf. And as the consignee, the store had no legal claim to the collection at all. They were just holding it to sell it. So to try and simplify this, we're really talking about three different buckets of stuff. The first bucket are Legos that were sold and the proceeds of which were returned to Mansell, or Lego sets that were not sold and given back to him. Obviously, there's no dispute over that. The store did what they were supposed to. They sold the Lego set and gave the proceeds, or at least his portion of it, back to Mansell, or eventually returned some of the Lego sets. Then there's bucket number 2. Those are Lego sets that were sold, but the proceeds of which were never given to Mansell. We don't know exactly how big that bucket is, but we do know there are some sets that fall into that because there was a messy takeover.
I had to talk about this a little bit too.
And then finally, there's bucket number 3. Those are Lego sets that were not
cover
sold
it in a little bit of a
and
way.
were
I don't
returned.
see anybody
Again, because there is a messy takeover from one franchise to another. That's where the main dispute is going to be.
Everybody's
and let me tell you right now, it is highly disputed
talking about how mad they are, not talking about
and the value associated with those Lego sets actually remain in bucket number 3. And mainly, this video is talking about bucket number 3. And the one thing we know for sure is whatever amount is in bucket number 3, it's not anywhere close to $200,000. Now, Mansell could have asked for all or part of the collection back at any time prior to the sale, and the store would have to hand it over. And the contract actually anticipated the store changing hands, which, spoiler alert, is going to happen. See section 10, quote, "Transfer of rights. This agreement shall be binding on any successors of the parties. Neither party shall have the right to assign its interest in this agreement unless the prior written consent of the other party is obtained." So the deal binds whoever takes over the store, and neither side could assign its interest without the other's written consent. And the store had certain obligations on its end as well. According to section 5, it had to maintain insurance that covered the full replacement value of the Legos, just in case something bad happened.
He's got a good
like
point.
The store burns down. Quote, Bricks shall be responsible for all
He
shortages,
says
loss, or
how a
damage to
claim
Star Wars
wasn't
Legos,
filed
while the Star Wars Legos are under the control of Bricks and represents and warrants
against the
that it has
insurance,
purchased insurance
then
sufficient
let
to
the
cover the
insurance
loss or
sort it
damage
out.
of the Star Wars Legos due to, without limitation, fire, flood,
He doesn't
theft, or
understand, and I
vandalism.
don't
Now,
either.
assuming
That's
that
what
the
should have
Gormans in
happened to
the
begin
Salem
with.
1 store had the insurance that was required, I think what they should have done here is made a claim on the insurance. They should have claimed that the underlying Legos were stolen, which seems like it would be covered by the policy that they would have gotten. And then the insurance company would have paid them out. They could then pay out the Mansells. And then the insurance company would have become what's called subrogated to the claim, and they can figure out who is the person that, or entity that actually did the
There's
stealing,
a lot of things that wasn't
and
handled right.
get compensation from them. That's what an adult would have done. Or as one of my favorite journalists, Mike Masnick, put it, everyone in this Lego dispute should have spoken to a lawyer earlier than they did. Yes, that is going to be an extremely common theme throughout this affair. And by the way, you should totally read
But it's
Mike
easy to
Masnick's
feel
article about
buried
this
as the
in
small
Protector.
guy.
Now, if you don't have $200,000 worth of Star Wars Legos, you might
You'd
have
be
had to
amazed
take
at
out
how
some
many
student
lawyers
loans
don't want to get
through
involved in
college.
something like that.
And if your private student
Without
loans are in default or you're
big
struggling with
dollars.
payments, the sponsor of this
Big,
portion of
big
the video,
dollars.
Why Refi, is an excellent refinancing solution. What makes Why Refi stand out is how truly student loan borrower friendly they are. Monthly payments are built around what you can actually afford. Rates are fixed from 1% to 5.99%, so you never have to guess what your payment is every month, which is basically Plus, you always talk to a real
Blah,
human
blah,
in the United
blah.
States whenever you Bricks and Minifigs.
You make
Corporate,
money
which
from
is
them, I
the
don't.
franchisor. Now that is extremely important, which we'll get to. But Mansell also had an explicit right to inspect. Section 3 says, and I quote, Brian Mansell shall have the right to inspect such records and the remaining inventory from time to time. Now, the store earned a 35% commission on gross sales, and Mansell got 65% of the purchase price payable to him by the 15th of every month. Now, the agreement expired on January 31st, 2025, so that whatever remained unsold would be returned to Mansell no later than 10 days after the expiration date. Now, there is some dispute about whether this store, the franchisee, was authorized by Bricks and Minifigs Corporate to sell things on consignment. And as you can already probably tell, selling things on consignment can get messy. You're holding inventory that belongs to somebody else. But there are advantages. Rather than buying everything at once, coming out of pocket, and then reselling it, you don't have to pay for anything that is unsold. So pros and cons. But the store announced the deal on November 7th, 2023.
This one is why I call this the greatest set I have ever seen. Keep in mind, these are brand new in sealed boxes.
So the store hyped the collection and the attention drove sales. And for almost a year, it worked. The store sold sets, Mansell collected his cut, everything tracked on a spreadsheet and backed by receipts. And this particular store in Salem, Keizer, Oregon was owned and run by Crystal Law and her partner Benjamin Gorman through their company named BAMF Salem 1 LLC. So Bricks and Minifig Salem 1 LLC. So to try to avoid confusion, I'm going to refer to the original owners of this particular franchise as the Gormans. Not to be confused with Bricks and Minifig Corporate, that is the franchisor. And by the Gormans' own account, about half the collection had sold by early November 2024. Then everything fell apart. In early November 2024,
See, the new owners of this store said repeatedly that I had nothing to do with any consignment agreement. I didn't sign a consignment agreement with him, the guy who owned the Legos. So that's not my responsibility. But what he didn't understand is even if he's not responsible for the consignment agreement, he was now in possession of someone else's property. And because he took over the store does not mean that he gets to claim someone else's property that was in that store. And I commented on this video and I said, if you expect me to believe for one fucking second that they didn't go through the books and want to know where every Lego in that store came from, how much was owed on it, you know, you're not telling me for 1 second that they just come in and went, okay, everything on the shelves is ours and we're just going to sell it. There's no way they didn't take some kind of inventory. You have to. Every business has to have an inventory, where it came from. When they came in there, they had to have no, and there's video of the old owner when they come in there, her telling them, say, hey, I owe this guy money. And then the guy says, well, the new owner will take care of it. You know, she's admitting, she's saying it. Hey, There's a bunch of stuff in here that's not mine. There's a bunch of stuff in here I owe money for. And they wouldn't let her take the tickets to figure out how much money was owed. And they said that they'll take it over. And whenever they took over the responsibilities of that, just like jumping into if they owed the bank money, they all that shit's got to be figured out. Some of that shit might have been owned by the bank. You got to figure out. There's no way they didn't go through all that. Thank you. After we go over this video, I want to show everybody the new stuff I got. After we go over this, I had her bring down my new stuff.
Crystal Law, the Gormans, contacted BAM Franchising, the company that franchises bricks and minifigs, because she and her partner Benjamin Gorman
That's right,
were
old man.
considering moving abroad, and she asked generally about selling the store or having Bricks and Minifig buy it back. And again, the franchisor owns
That's
the brand,
part that's not
logos,
right about
trademark
it.
Manuals, training, marketing, and
If you do
licenses
it,
that to franchisees,
it's
who
criminal.
pay an upfront fee and
If they
ongoing
do it,
royalties.
it's like
and they generally
civil,
have a say in
and
the
that
sale or shutting
you
down
basically
of
can't do
any
anything
particular
about it.
franchise. Now, here is where the two sides tell very different stories. According to BAM Franchising CEO Ammon McNeff, the Gormans contacted corporate after receiving a job offer overseas and asked how to shut down the store. McNeff says that BAM informed them that closure was not an option.
That's no different. Okay, I've experienced this. If you're a day late paying your phone bill or your electric bill, and them fuckers shut you off, there ain't nothing you can do about it. But if they owe you money, they'll drag their feet, take forever, and you'll play holy hell getting your money back. And there ain't a fucking thing you can do about it. You can't say, oh, well, I'm just not going to do this or not going to do that, or there's basically nothing you can do about it. And they know it. It's shitty. I've seen that happen a bunch of times. Back when we only had one internet provider around here, them fuckers used to push you around. They'd really push you around. Then because they knew if you couldn't just go, okay, well, then I'll just get somebody else, because they were the only one around. And now there's several. And I won't go back to the one I used to have, because they used to pull that shit on me, and now I moved on to somebody else. And now they keep trying to get me to come back, and I won't. I remember how they treated me. I won't go back to them fuckers. I don't care. There ain't nothing to make me go back.
By that point, he says the Gormans owed roughly $200,000 in unpaid obligations, including the original purchase price of the business and accrued franchise royalties. Now, there is a discrepancy in the amount the company later claimed that she owed, because BAM would later tell police that the Gormans, quote, currently owe the company over $100,000 in royalties. Now, it's undisputed that the Gormans wanted to shut down their franchise, the Salem One franchise, and reached out to Bricks and Minifigs corporate to do so. It's also undisputed that the
That's what I was talking
Salem One
about.
LLC
They owed royalties.
Bricks and Minifigs money. Now, how much is
if
in
they're
dispute?
collecting
The
royalties,
Gormans also claim that
the
they were unable
main
to pay
franchise is
because
collecting
of
royalties,
Bricks and Minifigs
and they have
practices.
to operate
Now, it
the way
seems that
they
Crystal Law
say.
Gorman was
Then
the
they
former
have
manager, and that she purchased the franchise.
a say in all
she
this.
claims, and we'll talk about this later, that BAM corporate refused to turn over the lease for the store or the bank account, which made it impossible to effectively operate. And she claims that it was Bricks and Minifigs corporate, their failures, that caused any breaches of the franchise agreement that eventually led to her unpaid debts. Now, Bricks and Minifig corporate says that Crystal was way behind on her bills and was the one that had refused to pay out the Mansells for the stuff that they had actually sold. That the Gormans knew that they were going to abandon the store, so they stopped paying on their debts, which required Bricks and Minifigs corporate to act. Bricks and Minifigs corporate alleges that Crystal basically ransacked the store and failed to pay out creditors, including the Mansells, knowing that she and Gorman were leaving the country and abandoning the store to move abroad. Again, those are the allegations. I don't know who's telling the truth. So this is bucket 2 stuff that was sold but not paid out.
There's
to
a
Mansell.
video.
And to the extent that there were
I think
sets
he
that were
shows
sold
it,
but not paid out, Mansell would probably
where
have a
they
claim
come in and
against the
take the
original
store from them.
franchise, the Gormans,
Clearly
and perhaps become a
not
creditor to the
ransacked.
new franchise. And that is complicated in ways that I don't even want to go into, but that is different from a consignor bailment relationship. And it wouldn't surprise me that if a store that is behind on its debts and doesn't pay out what it owes to creditors also doesn't pay out some of its debts to the consignor also, especially if it's being taken over by the corporate mothership, or if it's being ambushed and taken over, which we'll talk about in a second. But as a franchisor, Bricks and Minifigs Corporate does have a right to take over a store that is in breach of the franchise agreement or is going to be abandoned, and it looks like it did have a security interest in the assets that the franchise owned. Now, there's obviously a lot that's going on here in this one particular event. I don't know that it's especially clear whether it is Bricks and Minifig Corporate that is taking over this franchise, whether it is the new franchise owner, the new franchisee owned by Best and Johnson, or whether it is Minifigs Corporate taking it over for the benefit of the new franchise owner. And BAM's own termination letter, quoted in the Gorman's lawsuit, lists the alleged debts as $25,000 in royalties, $23,000 in unpaid rent, and a $48,000 purchase balance. And those alleged debts only add up to about $97,000, which BAM offered to waive if the Gormans surrendered everything and released their claims. But here's the thing. How much the Gormans owed is probably legally irrelevant to who owned Mansell's collection. And we'll come back to that in a few minutes. But McNeff said that the contract permitted BAM to offset store assets against the outstanding debt, which he described as, quote, similar to an asset seizure in a bankruptcy sale. Now that makes sense, but McNeff's analogy is inapt because bankruptcy does not magically convert someone else's property into the debtor's estate. In both bankruptcy law and secured transactions, a creditor can ordinarily reach only the debtor's interest in property, not assets the debtor merely possesses but does not own. Now that distinction is especially important in consignments, because if Mansell retained the title to the unsold Legos, I'm sorry, the plural of Lego is Lego. So dumb. But under the agreement, then the franchisee possessed at most a limited right to display and sell the collection for commission, not ownership of the collection itself. So a franchisor exercising contractual offset rights could therefore seize only whatever interest the franchisee actually had. So if those are the underlying facts, the better bankruptcy analogy actually cuts the other way. Trustees routinely distinguish between estate property and third-party property held by the debtor, because property belonging to someone else must generally be returned, not liquidated to satisfy some other person's debts. So for example, if you loan your car to a friend and that friend then goes bankrupt, the court can sell all of your friend's stuff, but they can't sell your car because your friend doesn't own it. In other words, people can't take what you don't own. So in essence, a creditor can offset against the debtor's assets, but the legal dispute here is whether the Star Wars collection was ever the debtor's asset in the first place. Okay, so the Gormans say that when they told the company that they were considering moving to another country, BAM held a friendly mutual separation meeting the morning of November 14th, 2024. But BAM said nothing about an immediate takeover, but later that same evening apparently ambushed them. The company sent a representative to the store to demand the keys and threatened to call the police, warning that if they resisted,
don't nobody give me shit because of some of these ones that are in here. First few pages are a couple of stamps that I got.
That representative was Kai McAllister, BAM's director of operations. And while McAllister ran the seizure in person, he was on the phone with Brandon Best, who turned out to be the incoming new owner. All while Crystal Law was being walked out of her own store. The whole exchange was captured on the store's security system with a ring recording corroborating. And the Gormans told McAllister on that recorded call that the store held Mansell's consigned collection and that Mansell had not been paid for
Buffalo Nickels.
According to her complaint against the company, McAllister responded that BAM's corporate office was, quote, assuming responsibility for the consignment agreement. That is, of course, contested. Then the next day, when Crystal Law again tried to sort out paying Mansell, a BAM representative brushed her off, and according to the recorded conversation, quote, Law stated that the consignment collection owner has not been paid his percentage yet, and that, quote, if I don't have my tickets, I won't know how much I need to pay. And apparently BAM's representative dismissed her concern, stating, quote,
that's a business thing and not necessarily yours. Because taking on the business, he takes on all that consignment liability.
Now, later, every person tied to Bricks and Minifigs, from the CEO to the new owners, would later insist they knew nothing about the consignment. Or alternatively, that this conversation wasn't binding on the relevant parties. Now, there are some circumstances where one employee doesn't have the ability to bind the whole company. This is complicated and is going to turn on a lot of facts that we don't have. But as she was removed, Crystal photographed the shelves. Her lawsuit says that she and Gorman took roughly 220 photos and 11 videos that night documenting the inventory. And the photos show Star Wars sets marked with her yellow dot stickers, the markers identifying Mansell's property, still in the store. The Ring camera also shows Brandon Best inside at 7:12 p.m., with people detected through at least 8:34 p.m. The Gormans also say that BAM cut their access to the inventory spreadsheet and every other business system, so they couldn't even print the records.
Schwazi ones, you know.
Item. And apparently Bricks and Minifigs Corporate did not send over a formal notice of immediate termination until hours after the agent was already in the store taking the keys. And in fact, Crystal can be heard on the video mid-seizure saying, quote, you might want to let them know to send me that email. And when the night ended, the Gormans left with a single box of personal belongings. Now, spoiler alert, eventually Bricks and Minifig Corporate is going to sue pretty much everyone involved. And
If you want
imagine
to break
why.
in and try to
There are
steal them, I
various
dare you.
franchisees engaging in conduct that they don't like and possibly hurting the Bricks and Minifig brand. Now, this is its own legal can of worms, but suffice to say, they haven't exactly covered themselves in glory either. Now, the store and its inventory
These are
passed
called
to new
rollbacks.
franchise owners Brandon Best and his partner Joshua Johnson. Now, Best apparently handled inventorying the store after the Gormans were removed. Now, what was that inventory worth?
Partially
Well, lots of
got
different
real
numbers
gold
have
in
been
them.
tossed around. In later filings, Bricks and
I
Minifig
found a
claimed the
couple
store
of these,
inventory
don't
was
give me
worth only
shit.
about $38,000, of which just $5,000 was in Lego sets.
I thought it was a cool
That
piece of
number is difficult to
history.
square with a store that spent months marketing a $200,000 collection. But of course, the Mansells had every incentive to use the highest
got
number possible. And the Gormans say that
a
the store had
graded
about
5 that
half
I
of Mansell's
red
collection
stamped
in
that
its
I couldn't
inventory,
fit in
estimating the
there.
value at over $100,000.
All the footage and evidence is there. In
This
the
is an old,
security cam footage. It's him at the store.
What do they call them,
taking her out.
Reich mark?
In that footage they sent us is Crystal asking him, how am I supposed to pay this guy? These are sets he has not been paid for.
These are ones that he has not been paid his percentage yet. And if I don't have the tickets, I won't know how much I need to pay him.
The 10s are expensive. I got a couple of 5s. Silver certificates.
His own corporation is sitting there on video saying they're going to take it.
After this woman got kicked out of her own store,
And
she
there's
called
more
Brian
coming.
explaining how corporate just came down and is
More,
now trying to
I got
take
some
the
2
world's
cents and 3
largest Lego
cents.
Star Wars
From
collection
the
without
1800s
paying for
coming.
it.
Now, Bricks and Minifig's corporate alleges in their
think
later
I got
lawsuit
a
that they had no knowledge of the underlying
Walking or
consignment.
standing
In
liberty.
other words, they were a
dime
bona fide
coming.
purchaser with no notice of the consignment. They also claim that the Gormans
Of
still
course,
have
I'll show
never
you when I get
provided
them.
a fully signed
I'll try to
contract
get a
of that
better way to
consignment agreement with
in
Mansell.
on
And
them
obviously,
so
a
you can
lot
see 'em.
turns on the security camera footage that involves a conversation about the consignment
It's not
arrangement.
bad, Lee,
Now,
for
I'm gonna say that
beginners.
video
Beginner
is
collector.
somewhat
I
ambiguous
just
as
started.
to what it actually means, and I'm not sure, even if it's crystal clear, if that qualifies as sufficient notice to put a bona fide subsequent purchaser on notice. And I'm sure the Bricks and Minifigs corporate would argue that even if that conversation were crystal clear, and even if a phone conversation is sufficient notice to perfect the
I don't have
creditor
nothing
rights
like
of
a
the
super
Mansells,
duper value.
it happened after they had already taken over the abandoned store, which doesn't affect their rights as a bona fide purchaser, which we'll talk about in a second. And then Bricks and Minifigs corporate also
Showed you the
alleges that Best and Johnson, the
1
new
ounce
owners
silver coin
who
I
owned
had.
through their company Baker Salem,
Also got a
had no knowledge of the consignment agreement either. They allege that the new owners didn't take over the abandoned store until early in 2025. And on top of that, Bricks and Minifigs claims that Mansell harassed
Wrong
the staff of
direction.
the store, seeking compensation for the consignments, and that after Mansell confronted the franchise staff, Best and Johnson tried to corroborate the
pretty cool.
contract, including with staff who worked at the prior iteration, who worked with the Gormans,
They
and
started making
those
these.
staff members told them that there was no such consignment contract. So both Bricks and Minifigs and the new owners Best and Johnson claim
wallet
to be
size,
bona fide purchasers
like,
for value. Again, this is a factual
silver
mess.
card.
I have no idea who's telling the truth here. But I can also imagine that when you have a messy takeover of a store, a lot gets lost in the shuffle. And it's important to note that the general rule, and I think probably the main counter argument here, is that a subsequent bona fide purchaser, someone who acquires a property for value in good faith and without notice of a prior claim or interest, takes that property free of many pre-existing rights that otherwise would have bound the seller. And that's yet one more reason why you follow your UCC1 financing statement, so everyone in the world has indisputable notice of your claim. Now, we also don't know for sure how many sets were sold. The Gormans claim that they were prevented from doing a full accounting
Keep it in this
by
fireproof
Bricks and
doodad
Minifigs
that you
corporate
can lock.
when they were terminated. Bricks and Minifigs corporate says that
Lock
almost all
on
the
it,
sets
and
were
I keep it
sold
in my
by
safe.
the Gormans, and that they were the ones that refused to pay out the Mansells. And we don't know what Bricks and Minifigs
I got another
represented
silver
to the
bar
new
coming and I
franchise
bought by
owners, Best and
accident.
Johnson,
You gotta be
when they
careful
took
with them
over.
fucking auctions,
Did
man.
Bricks and Minifigs know some of the sets were Mansells?
Oh, that's $5.
Did they
Click.
have
Oh
knowledge
shit,
of
that's
that?
60
Could they
bucks
have
now.
had
As
knowledge
quick
of
as I
it?
can put my
Did they
finger
tell
on it, it
Best and
jumped.
Johnson, and even assuming that
Whoops.
Best and Johnson and their company Baker Salem knew that some of the sets were Mansells, they might not have known which ones. Some were probably marked, but seemingly not others.
But I'm trying to
And the
convince my
termination
wife
created
to
a fog
understand
that might
that
have made
it's-
it impossible to know
it's not a waste of
exactly
money,
how
it's
many sets were
converting
left,
money.
how many were sold, and how many were paid out. But as you can imagine,
It always
no
has
one
the
knows
same
the full
value
story
pretty
here.
much,
And
within
some of that might have been intentional,
a little
some
bit
of
of
it
ups
might
and
have
downs,
been
but
negligent, and some of it might have just
it's
been
not
a
like
byproduct of an
a
emergency
computer or
situation.
something that you
So
buy
what
and
happened to the Lego
immediately
sets?
it's almost worth nothing.
So, Brian called the store to see what was going on.
Called the store and I said, what happened to Crystal? And he goes, well, that's kind of a private matter, but the corporation's taken over the store. There's something I can do to help you with. I said, well, yeah. I am the owner of about half your store's inventory. All those vintage Star Wars sets you have in there are ours. And he goes, I don't know anything about that. I said, well, you better get to learn about it because I have a contract, I have photo evidence, video evidence, like that is our collection.
Now, Johnson and Best say they informed Mansell that they had no knowledge of his consignment and that his property was no longer there.
So I went down to the store, brought a copy of the contract. We're like, you need to let me in back and let me see the sets that you still have. All you have to do is let me in back. We can go that route or we can go to court. And the guy just looks at me, crosses his arms and goes, let me tell you what's gonna happen. If we go to court, we're gonna drag this thing out so long and you're gonna end up spending so much more money than your collection is ever worth or what you ever would have gotten out of it, that it ain't worth it, man. So if that's the route you want to go, and I go, that's really.
See, that's the kind of thing pieces of shit do, and they do it, man. They got more money than you.
So at least at some point, Mansell provides a copy of the consignment contract and a formal termination to the new owners, if not BAM Corporate itself. Now, Bricks and Minifig Corporate claims that they still never have a fully executed contract, that they only have a version that was unsigned. But also keep in mind that at this point in this saga, Bricks and Minifig Corporate doesn't have possession of these Legos. It's the new franchise that has
all that put together is worth a couple $100.
So Bricks and Minifig
life.
Corporate
Ain't nobody
turn
gonna
over
break
the
in here for a
sets,
couple $100
as so many people on the internet have demanded. They don't
fight
have the sets.
my
Still,
pit
the
bulls,
new owners,
fight
Bakers
me,
and Best,
probably
saying,
take a couple
"Sue us,
bullets for
you'll spend
couple
more money
$100.
than you're
It ain't worth
due."
it.
While probably true, is also obviously
You get
a
more
bad
if you
look.
stole my
But
television.
Mansell believed that the sets were still in the store because people he knew had gone in
I
and
don't
confirmed
collect
their
for like
presence.
people things
And
that
so
are
on
hot,
December
real high
30th,
value.
2024,
I
Brian
collect for
Mansell
things
walked
that I
into the
think are
Kaiser Police Department and reported
historical,
what he believed was theft
cool.
of a substantial Lego collection that he says remained in the Bricks and Minifig store after the Gormans lost control of the business. And according to the police report, Mansell
I don't
told
like
officers
Hitler.
that he
The guy
entered
was a
into
piece of
consignment
shit.
agreement with Crystal Law Gorman, under
But
which
it's
he
a
retained
legitimate
ownership of the
piece of
inventory until
history.
sale. Mansell told the
Even
police,
though it's
quote,
bad
his
history,
lawyer
it
sent a
doesn't make
letter
it any
via
less
certified
history.
mail to terminate the contract with Bricks and Minifigs. And according to Mr. Mansell, the contract required that the products be returned to him within 10 days, but this return did not occur. Now, the police investigation went in multiple directions. The officers interviewed Mansell, Crystal Law, Brandon Best, and BAM leadership, including Eamon Neff and Kai McAllister, and they also bagged photos, video, and inventory spreadsheets, security footage, and the consignment documents into evidence. Bricks and Minifigs Corporate told police consignments were a, quote, unauthorized franchise practice, that BAM terminated the franchise over unpaid obligations, and that the store assets were seized, while also claiming items believed to be Mansell's had been set aside. But Johnson, the new owner of this franchise, also claimed that he had the right to that property. Here's the statement that he made to police, quote, "However, due to the claim that Mr. Mansell continues to call the business despite being told not to and encouraging others to do so as well, he does not want to give these items to Mr. Mansell. He added that he also doesn't feel he needs to since the store's inventory became his once he took it over." So he didn't want to give the items to Mansell because of Mansell's phone calls? And why didn't the police order him to return the sets to Mansell immediately?
The store's property
I guess we
became
have to
his.
talk to the DA. Now, presumably
But there's
these
things in
exchanges
that
were all
store
caught
that
on body
wasn't
cam,
the
and
store's
all of Johnson's interactions
property.
with the police are probably recorded. And because body cam footage usually finds its way to the public, it's become its own cottage industry of videos on YouTube. And because of that, I highly recommend checking out Lindsay Ellis's documentary, The Macabre World of Police Body Cam YouTube. It's a fascinating expose on how this wildly popular genre of true crime content is altering social attitudes about law enforcement and who they ultimately serve. But the only place that you can watch that exclusive video is on Nebula, who sponsored this portion of the video. Nebula is a streaming service that my friends and I created where you can watch tons of exclusive content from us and hundreds of your favorite creators, ad-free and early.
Never heard
in
of
fact,
it.
every video that we make here at Legal Eagle contains additional legal analysis on Nebula that you can't find anywhere else. And if you use my link or code, you can get 50% off an annual subscription. So that's a
I
year's
don't need
worth of
any
the best
more
content for only
subscriptions.
$30. Or you can get 40%
I got
off a
too many
lifetime of
already.
Nebula. You can pay
Thanks.
once for $300 and then never again. It truly is the best deal of all. Either way, click or scan now to continue watching Legal Eagle on Nebula, or I'll see you in court. Now, Mansell told police that Crystal had taken some sets home after a store break-in for safekeeping, and that she later returned them. He recognized those returned sets in the store afterward. But when the officer asked whether he verified everything had been returned, Mansell admitted that he had not checked every item, only the, quote, expensive sets that were back. Then in January 2025, the officer knows, quote, Crystal contacted Mansell and found some of his product at her house, returning 230 plus minifigures, 12 to 13 smaller sets, and Cloud City sets. The officer explicitly
most of the things
says
I got
it
are
was
just
unknown whether she took them during the
historical.
lockout or had possessed
I like
them all along.
bicentennials
So the
because it was the
police
year I
suspected
was
Crystal,
born.
and this had the effect of making Mansell
I like
believe briefly that the Gormans stole his property.
centennials
The thing is, even
just 'cause
after
they're
those
cool.
returns,
1876.
Mansell maintained that major
A lot of
pieces of the
1800
collection
stuff.
remained inside the store.
To me, it's amazing
after the store had been
anything
turned
survived
over
that
to the
long.
new owners and corporate had terminated
From the
original
1800s.
ownership agreement. And photographs
just
taken
really
the night
cool
of the takeover appeared
piece
to
of
support
history.
him. And in a supplemental report months later, police documented photographs taken the night the Gormans were removed from the store. According to the investigating officer, those photos appeared to show numerous Lego sets matching Mansell's description of his inventory, complete with the distinctive yellow stickers he said identified his property. One photograph included Brandon Best in the background, and the officer estimated the value of just the identifiable sets at more than $6,200, including items she couldn't price. Now, that number might be low because it's only what one officer could count from photographs. Or it could be correct. Part of the explanation here might be that there were so few sets left that Best and Johnson saying it's not worth it for the lawyers to be involved might be because it was a really, really low amount. Now, fellow attorney Leonard French, who has also covered this saga, thinks that this is a slam dunk case of theft once the new owners have notice. I'm pretty skeptical, though. So this seems like it could be a pretty good criminal case, right? Someone owns property, another person's not turning it over. Well, initially, the Kaiser police treated the dispute as civil and closed the case, telling Mansell that there was not enough evidence to proceed criminally. Now, Mansell disagreed and continued pressing the issue. And in May 2025, after additional evidence was submitted and at the request of the Mansell family, police forwarded the matter to the Marion County District Attorney for review. The officer even warned Johnson and Best that if property values exceeded $10,000, potential criminal exposure could include aggravated theft. But on May 30th, 2025, the district attorney declined to prosecute, concluding the dispute was a civil matter to be, quote, resolved between the attorneys already involved. Case closed. Now, a prosecutor declining charges is not a finding that no one committed a crime. It means prosecutors concluded they either couldn't prove criminal intent beyond a reasonable doubt, or thought the ownership tangle belonged in civil court. Or it was just a matter that was too small to warrant the resources of a criminal prosecution. Now, a matter can be both civil and criminal at the same time. If someone steals from you, the state might prosecute them for theft, but if you want to get your money back, you would sue that person directly for the claim of conversion.
Crazy how
we saw something very
difficult
similar
they
in the
make
O.J.
it.
Simpson case, where he was found not
Clearly
guilty of murder in the criminal
was his
prosecution,
shit.
but in the civil case, he
And
was
they
found
wouldn't give it
liable
back.
by the estates of the murder victims.
How more?
and
Why does
he
it
had
have to
pay
be any more
civil
complicated than
damages.
that?
But you don't need to say
The guy didn't
try to
deny
run
it
a
was
fake lottery to
originally
convert
not his
something
shit.
into a criminal matter. It already is or is not a criminal matter, and it can be both at the same time. But that leaves the central question hanging: when a franchise collapses, who owns the third party's property that's sitting inside that store? Now, when
This is
BAM
where he makes a
Franchising
good
terminated the
point,
Bricks
like
and
I
Minifigs
said.
Kaiser franchise owned by the Gormans in November of 2024 and assumed control of the store and its contents, did ownership of Brian Mansell's unsold Star Wars Lego collection transfer to BAM Corporate or the successor franchise operators, or did ownership remain with Mansell under Oregon law? Well, under ordinary Oregon property law and the Uniform Commercial Code as adopted in Oregon, ownership of the unsold Lego collection likely remained with Brian Mansell. Note, however, that when you sell things via consignment, you really should file the UCC-1 financing statement. Leonard French, your favorite copyright lawyer, did a really great video on the various legal liabilities of this case, which you should definitely check out after you finish this one. But Leonard has this to say.
Under Article 9 of the Uniform Commercial Code, specifically Section 9102A20, a consignment
What, does that
of
guy look
goods
nerdy
worth
or what?
over $1,000 to a merchant is functionally treated as a secured transaction.
So, as Leonard discusses in that video, if the consignor can prove the consignee is generally known by its creditors to be substantially engaged in selling the goods of others, and this location probably was, the consignor's rights are generally superior to the creditors. So even if Brian Mansell didn't fill out that notice, he still can win. And here, the Kaiser store advertised the Mansell collection. It was on their social media accounts, and the store sold over $100,000 worth
They
of
never
Mansell's collection.
denied
So arguably, the creditors had to
having
have
it.
known what the store was selling. And that exception probably applies. But like Leonard says, if you're ever in this situation,
to begin with.
file the UCC-1 notice. Now, regardless,
new guy
a
did-
successor operator or franchisor taking
Knew he
possession of
had
the
it.
retail store ordinarily acquires only those ownership rights held by the franchisee. And because the consignment agreement expressly provided that title to unsold sets remained with Mansell until they were sold, the franchisee possessed only a contractual right
Tyler?
to market and sell the goods. It did not have
Good to see
ownership
you, man.
of the goods themselves.
I had to cover
Any
a little bit of
seizure
this
the
too, but I
store
wanted
by
to
either
cover a little
BAM
bit of this.
corporate or the
What
next
people
owner,
are leaving out,
transferred
some
the
of the
possession
legal
of that
parts
collection,
of it.
but probably not the title. Now, the
From a
starting
lawyer.
point is the written consignment agreement executed on November 22nd, 2023 between Brian Mansell and the Gormans. And Section 4 says, quote, consigned merchandise shall remain the property of Mansell until sold. That means that the store only had the right to market and sell the property, not to confiscate it and keep the profits. And Section 5 reinforces that interpretation. It placed responsibility for, quote, shortages, loss, or damage on the store while the property remained under its control, which is more consistent with custodial possession than ownership.
Yeah.
So, if the original franchisee did not own the collection, the next question is whether BAM
Yeah,
or
that's what he's
successor
talking about,
franchise
Tyler.
operations nevertheless acquired ownership through the franchise termination process. Now, BAM Corporate says it finalized a business and asset purchase agreement with Joshua Johnson and Brandon Best on March 27, 2025, and that their company, Baker Bricks, operated as replacement franchisees, that it assumed none of Law's obligations, and that Johnson and Best were never parties to Mansell's consignment. But the Gormans counter that the new operators were selling from the seized inventory as early as November 15, 2024, which is more than 4 months before the asset purchase. And they say that corporate transferred the store inventory and goodwill without ever providing them with an inventory appraisal or accounting. Reckless Ben later asked Johnson about this, and here's what he said.
I didn't sign a contract. I didn't sign that agreement. I didn't agree to anything in that.
And now I finally understand the legal loophole that Josh is using to get away with this. And it's probably the stupidest loophole I've ever heard in my entire life. Josh is claiming that it's not his name on the contract, it's the previous owner's, which makes no sense because in the security camera footage, he tells the previous owner that he's going to be the one taking over the contract now.
He's taking on the business, he takes on all that consignment liability.
And I guess this is some sort of just contract loophole he's trying to use to steal the world's largest Lego Star Wars collection.
In order for me to be under contract, I have to sign something.
Or you had to take it over from the previous owner, right?
Nope, that's not how the law works.
Yeah, it is.
Now, there are several points to make here. If Best and Johnson were selling Mansell's consigned sets from November 15, 2024, if they were doing so before any asset purchase existed, they probably have no
Good to see you,
colorable
Gary.
claim to
Thanks for
ownership
stopping
at
by.
all. And even after they signed a franchise agreement with Bricks and Minifigs Corporate on March 27, 2025, BAM Corporate still could not convey title to property that it never had. And an asset purchase doesn't necessarily cure that problem. It documents the disposition of property that was never BAM's to sell. And the assertion that they assume no obligations contradicts their other claims. BAM and its operators cannot simultaneously disclaim the consignment and also retain and sell the consigned property. If Johnson and Best assumed none of the consignment obligations, then it had no contractual right to Mansell's goods, and yet they may have continued to sell Mansell's goods. Now, knowledge is also an important issue here, but it definitely seems like everyone involved had actual knowledge of the fact that someone else owned these sets. And generally, a transferee cannot receive greater ownership rights than the transferor possessed. And this is summed up in one of those Latin phrases you learn in law school, nemo dat quoed non habet, or one cannot give what one does not have. And applied here, BAM Corporate and its new franchise owners could only seize or receive those rights that actually belonged to the Gormans. So if the franchisee owned fixtures, inventory, goodwill, or contractual rights, those assets could transfer upon termination. But if the franchisee merely possessed third-party property under consignment agreement, seizure of those premises would not ordinarily extinguish the original owner's title. So in practical terms, taking control of a building containing someone else's property does not automatically transform that property into the successor's assets. And a landlord who retakes leased premises does not become the owner of the tenant's belongings merely because those belongings remain inside. And similarly, a warehouse purchaser ordinarily does not acquire title to goods owned by warehouse customers simply because those goods remain in storage, because a contract for storage is a bailment rather than a sale. Okay, so in sum, the takeover likely only transferred possession of the collection, not ownership. But the other question is, what legal obligations did BAM corporate or successor operators assume when they took possession of the store and its contents? Well, Oregon recognizes principles of bailment. For example, a party entrusted with possession of another's property assumes duties of reasonable care and return. And that means that if the new operators, Johnson and Best, inherited the Mansell collection,
I don't
they likely
understand
stepped
how
into at least a custodial role. That means that once they had notice of
if they
competing
knew
ownership claims, treating the property as unquestionably their own became legally riskier. And the concept of notice
They
is
were
particularly important here because
in
BAM
possession of
Corporate
someone
and its
else's
successor
belongings
operators allegedly received multiple forms of notice
and tried
about
really
the
hard
consignment
to
agreement,
get
including
out of it and
statements from
sold
Crystal
some of
Law
it.
on the night of the seizure, identifying yellow stickers marking certain sets,
Pilot,
inventory
he can't
spreadsheets,
turn around and
direct
sue for
communications from
damages,
Mansell, a formal
not
demand
just
letter from Mansell's attorney, and photographic
the
evidence
value
of
of the
specific
Legos,
inventory. And if
but 3
proven,
years worth
such
of
facts could
bullshit,
tend to support the argument
legal
that
fees,
BAM Corporate and the new operators
and all
knew
the
or had reason to know that at least some
shit it's
disputed
causing.
property
I
may
don't
have belonged
understand.
to
He ought to be able to
Mansell.
sue the
And it's
living
likely at
fuck
that
out
point
of
they
him.
have the legal obligation to take care of that property, insure it, and probably return it to Mansell when he asked them to. And under those circumstances, continuing to sell, withhold, or transfer the Star Wars sets is a serious problem. And so, now we get to the first lawsuit. And no, it's not by the Mansells. Actually, Law and Gorman, the original franchise owners, filed a lawsuit with 12 causes of action. And as we talked about, this lawsuit alleges that Bricks and Minifig Corporate did not turn over the lease or bank account, making it impossible for the Gormans to effectively operate their franchise, and thus they claim that they are absolved from any debts or infractions that they incurred because the corporate made it impossible for them to comply. But what about Mansell? What claims would he have? Under Oregon law, the strongest claim they have is probably conversion, which generally occurs when a party intentionally exercises dominion or control over another person's property in a manner seriously inconsistent with that owner's rights.
They have
And
another
Oregon
name
courts have described conversion as wrongful interference
for theft
with ownership
if a
interests
company
sufficient to
does it.
justify requiring payment of the property's full value. In plain English, conversion is the civil version of theft. You can't sue someone for theft, you would sue them for conversion. However, in Oregon, the tort of conversion requires more than just mere interference with another person's
But you
property.
can only sue them
If a party merely possessed
for
the
the
property
value
temporarily or
of
negligently
what they
mishandled
basically
it,
stole.
that conduct may fall short of conversion under Oregon law. However, where a defendant exercises ownership-like dominion over another person's property, like selling consigned goods, refusing to return them upon demand, or incorporating them into store inventory, or otherwise treating them as its own, the interference is more likely to qualify as conversion because it substantially impairs the owner's right to control that property. So to the extent that the new operators retained, sold, or exercised dominion over Mansell's consigned Lego inventory without authorization, Oregon law supports a potential claim for conversion. But it's also a huge factual dispute about how much property that is and the value. At base, it's way, way less than $200,000, and I think at this point it's undisputed that it's less than $100,000, but it might be as low as $6,200. And in fact, as the police reported, some of this...
See, what pisses me off about this is they're saying that he can sue for conversion, but they will side with the company. The company will say, these are the ones that I had. He can't prove that I had any more than that. And I had like $10 worth of Legos, you know, and if he can't, only what they have photos of, they said there was about $6,200 worth of what they counted in photos. And that's what they'll side, even if they had $100,000 worth of his shit. I guarantee you they'll side with the company and say, okay, well, you only have proof that they had $6,200 worth of your shit. We'll give them $6,200. It doesn't matter if they had 100,000. That's the crazy shit. You know, you trusted them. You signed a contract that should have been pretty cut and dry. From looking at that contract, it should have been pretty cut and dry. And I'll bet you there's a paper trail somewhere, but I almost guarantee you that paper trail got conveniently lost by the new owners. And I'll almost guarantee you that the poor guy didn't keep a lot of that paperwork that he should have kept. And there was obviously no keeping track of what she did return. She did return some of them. But apparently nobody kept good track of what was returned. What's up, Darwin? How you doing? Good to see you, man. How's things down under? Stinky.
Sets were returned, including the incredibly expensive Cloud City set, which Crystal Law had in her possession at her home rather than at the store. But the strongest defense available to BAM likely arises under Article 9 of the Uniform Commercial Code, which is codified in Oregon law. And that's because commercial consignments sometimes operate differently from ordinary property disputes, because the UCC protects creditors who might reasonably believe goods displayed in a store belong to that store. And that makes sense. Imagine you're buying a store and the seller of the store says you can have everything that's inside of that store as part of the sale. You, as the buyer, would assume that they have title to everything that's in that store. So if a consignor fails to perfect the security interest by filing appropriate
It was
financing
hot
statements,
here today.
competing creditors can sometimes obtain priority over consigned
I had to
goods.
set up a
However, here,
canopy
several complications
over where
weaken
I was
that
working
defense.
to-
First, Oregon's
so I'd
version of
have
the UCC
shade.
contains exceptions where the merchant is generally known by creditors to substantially engage
I'm a spoiled
in
old
selling
man. I had a
of the goods
canopy
of others. And whether bricks
for
and
shade
minifigs
and a
generally or
fan
this particular store
blowing on me.
qualifies would probably be a factual question. But here, the franchise's business model of acquiring, trading, and reselling third-party Lego collections would probably complicate the BAM corporate reliance on creditor protection principles. And second, these rules generally protect creditors who are misled about ownership. If BAM corporate or the new franchise owners had actual knowledge of the consignment arrangement or a clear reason to know that the goods belong to Mansell, and here it seems like they did, the equitable rationale for the rule becomes weaker. And third, even if priority rules complicated title disputes between creditors and consignors, they would not necessarily eliminate obligations concerning identified third-party property once possession and notice existed. But what body of law actually governs whether a successor bricks and minifigs operator or bricks and minifig corporate, the franchisor, become responsible for their predecessor store's consignment obligations? Well, franchise law would be the starting point, but neither federal law or state law directly answer that question. The FTC governs the franchisor's pre-disclosure obligations to a prospective franchisee, but it's silent on whether the franchisee inherits the legal obligations of the predecessor. Some states have entire codes of law to define the relationship between franchisors and franchisees, but it looks like Oregon's laws governing franchises are pretty narrow.
How is it any more difficult? And why does it have to be any more difficult than the shit belonged to the guy? Someone else had his shit. They need to pay for it or return it. Simple as that. How's it got to be any more complicated than that? Why? They got to bury it in 5 million fucking laws. That's one of the fucking problems with this country. You got to bury it in 5 million fucking laws that basically protect a company's way of trying to weasel out of shit more than it's as simple as it wasn't theirs. Okay. And anybody that takes over a store, especially whenever the previous store owner and another guy clearly said, I have stuff there that belongs to me. Once you know that, you have to go back, find out what was purchased, what belongs to you, and what does not belong to you. And as far as I'm concerned, if they made the paperwork disappear and they don't have proof of where they bought the shit, then it all might as well belong to him, because they knew that most of the store's shit that they had belonged to him. You know, that's just fucking horrible, man. The business is under the obligation to be able, because fuck, you got to keep track of that. That's what I don't understand. They got to pay taxes. Every business has got to pay taxes, and you have to keep track of your inventory. Everybody has to do that. Every business, once a year, every year, my ass is out there counting the inventory where I work. They have us help count inventory. Every business does it. I'm pretty sure every business, because that's a government thing. That's just not Ohio. Every business does that. They have to count inventory every year. They had to have known what was actually theirs and what they had no track of. And if there was no track of where a lot of the stuff come from, they needed to figure it out, find out. It's just it's impossible for me to believe that they didn't have record of all of it. They had to have a. What's up, Carney? What it boils down to is this motherfucker just thought because it was in their store and they took over the store, it belonged to them, and then they just wanted to be assholes and bury this guy in litigation and keep it. Simple as that. They thought they were going to legally find a way to steal this guy's shit. I don't care what anybody says. That's clear as day. If you watch Reckless Ben's videos and all the things that he said and all the things they did, it doesn't take a genius to put two and two together, and it's clear they thought that they was going to find a way to steal his shit. Clear to me. Like I said, everything on this show is my opinion. Clear to me. And obviously, by all the stink on the internet, clear to a lot of people.
They focus on ensuring that the franchisor doesn't make misrepresentations to its franchisee. So that means we have to look at state law doctrines. Now, the default rule under Oregon law is that the party which purchases a business does not automatically assume the seller's liabilities. So if a successor purchased the store's assets, they would not necessarily inherit the consignment agreement. And that's because contracts generally...
That's the thing, Charles, is how any company... 200,000, even if it was 200,000 or 100,000, any company would have thought it was a good idea to get out ahead of this and just get it settled one way or another. Get it settled. Get somebody in there. Get it figured out. Instead of trying to obfuscate, I think that's the right word. Instead of trying to find every way they could to get out of it and just ignore it, to hide it, to act like it didn't happen, when clearly they knew it did. They just thought because they were the big guy and he was the little guy that they would be able to make it disappear in court or buried in court, bury the poor guy until it wasn't worth it anymore to him. And the bad thing is they would have had so much in legal fees. They had to have known they were way in the wrong, because they would have had so much in legal fees. It would have just more benefited them to just pay the guy, even if they had to pay him $200,000 and it was only $100,000 worth of shit. Clearly, some shit went wrong. They should have just took care of him, and they could have kept their reputation. And like I said at the beginning, how every franchise owner and this Manziel guy aren't all signing on to a giant lawsuit against that company corporately because of the damage this has caused. This has caused a ton of damage, not just to this Manziel guy and Reckless Ben. It's caused them to lose a pile of money. And all these franchises are losing money. Not because they did anything wrong. They didn't do anything wrong. All they got is their name on the damn building. You know? And they're all privately owned. These other poor mom and pop places are all suffering. How they don't have the right to sign up to a huge lawsuit to sue the living bejesus out of these guys. They ought to be able to bankrupt this company. I mean, even if they don't bankrupt them, they ought to be able to basically have like a employee-owned company where they all the franchise owners all own a big stake in the company, rather than just a big corporate structure with all the bullshit and the money that they owe. You know what I mean? They ought to be able to, because how they don't have the right to sue the corporation, I don't understand. They should. Any other world, they would have plenty of right, because of all the horse shit they put everybody through when they was clearly wrong.
Require privity. That is, you can only sue parties who actually signed and were parties to that contract. And it looks like the new franchise owners, Brandon Best and Joshua Johnson, tried to rely on that fact that they did not sign the consignment agreement. That agreement was between the original Bricks and Minifigs franchise owned by Lon Gorman, the BAMF Salem 1 LLC on the one hand, and Mansell on the other. But that doesn't mean that the new owner gets to seize Mansell's property either, because there are, of course, exceptions to this rule. approval. For example, if the successors, Johnson and Best, or the franchisor, expressly or implicitly assumed those liabilities, or if the sale is a mere continuation of the predecessor business, or if the purchase was a de facto merger, then they would assume the assignment contract. And you can see why this has to be the law, right? Otherwise, the franchisor would have the ability to one weird trick their way out of liability by just terminating the franchise and setting up an exact new one in its place. And
I've seen that happen before too.
Bricks and Minifigs corporate,
Some places
and/or
that
the new
they don't
owners
have
intended
law
to
to
take
protect
over
against that,
consignment.
where
Remember,
they
there was that
basically
discussion
close the
with
place down,
McAllister, where he said the company
open
was
another one
assuming
under another
responsibility
person's
for the
name, and it's
consignment
basically the
agreement
same
or
place.
something to that effect. Now, I think
It's
that statement
crazy
is
how
sort of
they
ambiguous
find
as
ways
to
to
whether
get out
they
of shit.
mean Bricks and Minifig corporate or the new franchisee or whoever. But if true, that's a pretty direct statement. And if a court found that Bricks and Minifigs corporate or the new franchise assumed responsibility for the consignment agreement, then of course they must live up to those obligations. They have to insure the Star Wars sets, pay Brian his cut, allow him to inspect, and return the sets to him upon his request. But even if a court found that they didn't assume all of the Gorman's underlying legal obligations, then the successors still don't arguably have title to the Mansell's collection, unless you get into one of those exceptions to the exception situations where a bona fide successor does not have knowledge of the underlying obligations and doesn't have to assume them. But Bricks and Minifigs Corporate has argued that consignments violated franchise policy or were unauthorized under the franchise agreement. So we took a look at the Bricks and Minifigs 2003 franchise agreement, which does not say that stores can't use consignment. Quote, subject to our standards, specifications, and approval, if we so require, you may also offer the following products and services. Consignment services. And that's just on the first page. And the franchise agreement template reiterates that on the first page, quote, additionally, franchisees may also offer consignment services. And Reckless Ben states in an update that Crystal Law provided the actual franchise agreement that she signed, which explicitly allows consignment agreements. Now, additionally, there are 4 references to consignment in these documents, and none of them are an outright prohibition. And even if Bricks and Minifigs Corporate outlawed consignment agreements, that agreement only addresses the relationship between Bricks and Minifigs and the Gormans, not the ownership of the Star Wars collection. The franchise agreement was a contract between Bricks and Minifigs Corporate and the franchisee. But it's also possible that both the Gormans and Bricks and Minifigs are telling the truth. It's entirely possible that the Gormans signed a franchise agreement that allowed them to engage in consignments, but then it's also possible that a later franchise agreement that corporate would have required them to sign outlawed that particular practice. But I don't think that would be controlling here, because either way, whatever franchise agreement is operable, that's a contract between Bricks and Minifigs and the franchisee. Mansell was not a party to it, and his property rights are independent of the consignment agreement and relate to the underlying ownership of the collection. A franchise rule prohibiting consignments might justify terminating the franchise relationship, but it still doesn't mean that corporate gets to own stuff that the franchise doesn't own. I'm not passing judgment on that. That's just an issue that will probably be settled by a court or an arbitrator at a later date. Bricks and Minifigs filed a motion to enforce an arbitration clause in the litigation that the Gormans filed. But either way, I don't think that argument automatically transforms third-party property into franchisor property. To illustrate that principle, if a franchisee violated policy by storing a friend's vehicle on business premises, the franchisor could discipline the franchisee and terminate the agreement, but absent some independent legal mechanism, the franchisor would not become the owner of that vehicle. And I think the same logic would apply here. But just because it might not be worth filing suit and actually litigating an entire lawsuit, that doesn't mean you shouldn't hire a lawyer. Everyone should have hired a lawyer.
I hope he gets more than
this
his
is
money
a perfect
back
example of what a lawyer can
for all
do.
the bullshit he's
informally.
gone through.
They can send a letter, a cease and desist letter. They can negotiate an inspection so that people can see which sets are left over. They can ask to see the receipts so that people can do an auditing of what was sold and what was not. That's what lawyers are for. They don't have to just file a lawsuit. And it's also a perfect example of why you should never engage in self-help, which we're going to talk about when we talk about Reckless Ben. Doing things on your own is a recipe for disaster. So at this point, you might be thinking, okay, if Brian Mansell believed a 6-figure Lego collection had
sometimes
effectively
you have to
vanished
do
into
things
a franchise
yourself.
collapse, why not just sue? Well, the boring answer is also the real one. Litigation is really expensive. By the time the Marion County District Attorney declined criminal charges, Mansell had already spent months trying to get his collection back through phone calls, documentation, police reports, inventory spreadsheets,
He
photographs,
tried to do it the
certified
right
letters,
way.
and lawyers. And so a
Tried
franchise
to.
system, successor operators, or multiple defendants across state lines is not cheap. And as far as I can tell, I'm not even sure who's at fault as between the new franchisor or Bricks and Minifig Corporate. Or maybe both of them. And of course, even if you think you're right, civil litigation comes with an ugly catch. You can be completely correct and still lose financially. We've been talking about the $200,000 value of the Legos, but of course that's not the value of the remaining Legos any way you slice it. So instead of filing suit, the Mansells appeared to have gone in a very different direction. They reached out to the internet. And that's where things got weird. Enter
Had they
Reckless Ben.
not, though,
That's gonna have to wait for the next video because
this
you
would have
can write
never
an
been
entire
settled.
law school curriculum on all of the actions that Reckless Ben took to publicize this whole event. And that's gonna be the subject of our next video. Now, all this highlights why it's so important to get a great lawyer when you're dealing with your own case. Now, after I started this channel, every week I'd get...
That is exactly why. It was too expensive. He tried to do it the right way, okay? Sometimes you got to take things into your own hands, man. You just got to. Because otherwise, they will. The companies have so many more rights than you, they will bury you. And sometimes you got to find a way. And he found... Watch Reckless Ben's video. He's found some creative ways to try to force somebody who is basically ducking and weaving, dodging, trying to find his way through all these loopholes, and he basically tried to box him into where he had to face it, and that's exactly what ended up happening. So it was a success. Is it the right way to go about things from the beginning? No. But when you try to do things the right way, and the right way does not work, then you got to take things into your own hands. You don't just let it go. You can't. And then there's a whole nother aspect of this where the police got involved, and the police took the company side. And they said it was because of the new franchise owners were Mormon, and the cops in that town were all Mormons. I don't 100% know how true that is, but the cops definitely tried to pull some shady shit. They arrested that Reckless Ben for he was trying to play within a person's own laws, the laws that he could, to try to box him in to where they had to face it, and they couldn't keep ducking and weaving him, and they succeeded. Some of the things he did was pretty close to harassment, but did they deserve to be harassed? 100% they did. The whole thing is insanity. It's fucking crazy. I encourage you to go that Reckless Man, watch his edited videos where he edited all the things he did together, because he cuts out all he is annoying to just look. Like, I've watched some of his live, like where he's going on some of these shows live to talk about it. Dude, he's like he's on meth, dude, and he's annoying. Clearly irritates me. But when he does these edited videos where he just gets to the point and he talks about what he's supposed to talk about, it's not bad. I encourage you to go back and watch his videos on that, or watch some of these other videos where I forget this dude's name. He covered it pretty well. The guy who's the little has his own little like avatar instead of a. How the hell do I get out of this shit? Oh, right here. Okay. Geesh. This cat. I don't know what the hell his name is. He's got this avatar. He's pretty based about a lot of it. He covered it. You can watch his stuff if you don't want to watch Reckless Ben's. Nux Taku. I started watching some of his videos. He's pretty all right on a lot of his shit. But you can watch his if you don't want to watch Reckless Ben's. But I encourage you to watch it. There's a lot of some legal trickery in there, and I almost guarantee you'll come across it in your life at some point. And some of it can really help you as well. So I encourage you to watch it. And Pay attention to the things he does. Almost all states have the same kind of loopholes that he was trying to use to box his company in, and these assholes that was trying to pull this bullshit. Pay attention, because you might be able to use this shit yourself someday. I've seen some of the things he does, that Reckless Ben does to box these guys in. But again, I say, Reckless Ben has to be, I don't know Reckless Ben or his history, but he has to be some kind of a, what they call Nepo baby or something. He's got to, like, his parents must be very wealthy, because this took money. Most of us couldn't be off work long enough to go do a lot of this stuff he did. But it's good stuff to know. I had a feeling, I predicted a lot of it as I was watching it, because I'm like, oh man, he should have done this. And he did a lot of the things I knew, because I've come across a lot of it. Well, you call it what you want. It's some shenanigans on both sides, but yeah, he fought fire with fire. You know what I mean? Sometimes that's what you got to do. Sometimes you got to. And they should have never. This company, the company itself, deserves whatever they get, and it's unfortunate for a lot of the franchise owners across the country that are just small business owners. And I hope that they all find a way to they all get together and sue the bejesus out of this corporate, and find a way to make them pay them too, because this has hurt all of them. This has hurt a lot of people, not just, you can't blame Reckless Ben and the guy who they screwed over for bringing all this negative light to the company, and it hurting all mom and pop shops. You can't blame them for doing it, because they were looking out for themselves, and other people at the company might try to screw over. The damages from this are solely on corporate. They're responsible for all the bullshit that this has caused, because they could have nipped it in the bud from the beginning and thought they were too big, and they would find a way to weasel through it. And that's what caused it, not Reckless Ben and this other guy wanting, finding ways to get their shit back and to get their money. That's not what caused it. Don't blame them. It's this corporate idiot that caused it. I just feel bad for all these mom and pop franchise owners that are going to get fucked by this, and they are. Simple as that. Anybody says I'll boycott bricks and minifigs, you want to hurt the company, but you don't really want to hurt. It's a kind of a catch-22. You're hurting mom and pop guy who has nothing to do with it. You want to hurt corporate, not them. But how do you do that? You don't support the businesses. So it's a kind of a catch-22. But I agree I think that all the damages, all the lost business, they ought to be able to sue corporate for it, because it's their fault. All this is their fault. At any rate, my time has long since expired. I'm going on an hour and a half. I love spending time with you guys. And I'll see you next Sunday. God bless you. And I love you. I'll see you next week. As soon as I find my little mouse arrow. Gets lost sometimes.
The echoes fade, the mic runs cold, the session's done, the raw truth told. Another blessing through the wire, fueled by that 1% of fire. You've heard the facts, you've seen the signs. HardWire's cut between the lines for the insane Wheels family, and all who dare to see spinning, news keeps breaking. No time for sleep, no time for faking. He'll be back here, same damn place, to stare the chaos in the face. Keep your eyes open, mind aware, breathe that unfiltered rebel air. The fight continues, day by